Wonderful. That was a terrific introduction. I always forget that was actually written by Thora Magnuson. She used to work for us. She was the director of public relations and marketing for me, and she did a really nice job with that little bio. I get kind of happy every time I hear it. Well, anyway, no further introduction necessary. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm honored to be part of the Women's Council of Realtors of Los Angeles and Beverly Hills. And today I'm going to be sharing with you a presentation that I feel is extraordinarily important. It's called Exterior Elevated Elements, or the triple E, or 3 E's, or EEE. And as in my introduction, I have been doing this for about 22 years, the inspection industry. And this inspection, the laws of this inspection recently came about, and I'm going to show you all that information and discuss everything that is pertinent, basically, for you guys to have that and understand what this is about. So what happened to lead us here? Now, unfortunately, the beginning of this presentation is a little bit sad. There's a little bit of tragedy here, and unfortunately, I think to be respectful of what occurred and why we are here now with this new law, I think it's very important for all of us to understand and have that information, again, so that we can be respectful of that and really, truly understand the importance of what happened and why this law of the exterior elevated elements has been brought into place. So on June 16th of 2015, shortly after midnight, 6 people sadly died and 7 others were injured after a balcony on which they were standing collapsed. The balcony was on the 5th floor of an apartment building in Berkeley, California. The district attorney of Alameda County launched a criminal probe into the incident. That same month, Mayor Tom Bates of Berkeley promised an investigation into the cause of the accident. Considered the likeliest cause was the balcony of the building was not constructed properly, leading to dry rot, causing the balcony to become structurally compromised. Overwhelming evidence points to dry rot causing the collapse and not the weight of the 13 students on it at that time. So here's some pictures of the actual balcony that did collapse. And again, I'm not trying to be alarming, but this is a tragic story. And I want to share it with you so that we really, really understand and that we can kind of, again, respect what happened and carry it into the future so that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. This you can see is the balcony that basically separated from the building right here and sort of folded and landed on the lower balcony. It's another view from the right side of it. These are some workers that are preparing to remove the fallen balcony, but you can see in this image the broken framing, the rafters that come through the building that actually held the weight of the balcony. And you can see this black sort of what looks like plastic. This is a vapor barrier that does not allow moisture to get into the structure of the building to potentially cause the damage and the dry rot, which absolutely was found out was the culprit. Again, another shot of the balcony, the framing members, the vapor barrier. And here again, the vapor barrier has been cleared away, and you can see every one of these framing members is dry rotted. And this is why it broke. Essentially, there was too much moisture entering into this area over the years, and the structural components were compromised to the degree where they could not hold the weight of what this balcony was designed for. So what did the city of Berkeley do? Obviously, this is a tragic incident. There was as we read earlier, there was a criminal probe launched to find out and discover why this occurred. So what did they do? Well, they created the Exterior Elevated Elements, E3 inspection program. And without reading the whole thing, basically, it's that they designed an inspection program that required the inspection and certification of any weather-exposed elevated elements. So weather-exposed elevated elements, like in the pictures before, could be a balcony. It's exposed to the elements. And that requires to, the requirement applies to R1 and R2 occupancies. The R is just basically a way of signifying that it's a residential building. R1 would be like transient sort of uses such as hotels and motels, things like that. And then the R2 group would be the group of buildings that are more used for permanent residence, such as triplexes and above, apartment buildings, things like that. You get the idea. So that's what those two designate. Basically, the property owners of these residential buildings containing 3 or more dwelling or sleeping units must have all projecting exterior elevated wood and metal decks, balconies, decks, landing, stairway systems, walkways, guardrails, etc., inspected by a licensed general contractor or other particular professional. So that's what the city of Berkeley did. They designed a law. They designed an inspection program to ensure that that city did not have to suffer the tragedy of what occurred on that evening. What are exterior elevated elements? This is just sort of a bit of a picture that kind of gives you an idea, sort of a skeletal view of a building. And we are talking about, remember that the exterior elevated elements, say that 3 times fast, the triple E's, they have to be 72 inches. They're exempt if they're 72 inches or less from the ground, so 6 feet or less. But you can see here the checkered outlined areas. These are balconies, these are stairs, guardrails, so forth and so on. This may give you a better idea. Exterior elevated element, including the supports or the associated waterproofing, railings, so forth and so on, that have the following properties. It extends beyond a building's exterior walls. It is designed for human use. It has a walking surface more than 6 feet above the ground level. It has load-bearing components made with wood or wood-based products, and they include balconies, decks, porches, stairways, walkways, and entry structures. You can see a few pictures here that kind of give you an idea that an exterior elevated element is not just a balcony or a porch. It could be a stairway that's attached to the building. In the upper right-hand corner, this stairway is made of metal with concrete steps. Well, as we read, that this is supposed to have wood in it. It's attached to the wood in the building. It's attached to the wood in the building, and then that has a vapor barrier to make sure the wood doesn't rot. So that's what the inspector would be looking at and trying to determine if that vapor barrier had been breached or compromised in any way. And this, on the lower right-hand corner, this is a wooden staircase. So the entire elevated element is made of wood, but it is also attached with wood. So that's what we're interested in when we're talking about the inspection and what component we're actually looking to inspect. This is just a picture that shows you exterior elevated elements. We have them all over our city and in many cities around the world. And some of them are made of wood or attached with wood components, and many of them have vapor barriers. So those are the ones that need to be inspected. It's just another picture giving you an idea of what an exterior elevated element is. And yet another one. And another. Now, the city of Berkeley, their law actually includes metal exterior elevated elements to make sure that the connection between the building is not rusting and so forth and so on. The law that we're going to talk about that pertains to us in the city of LA and most of the state of California, we're talking more about wood. But I'm showing you pictures of both wood and metal exterior elevated elements so that you can see the differences between the two, but also get the general idea that they all attach to the building in some fashion. And depending on how they're attached, those attachment points could have elements or parts of them that fail or that potentially could fail that need to be inspected or repaired and maintained in the future. So this is not just a Berkeley problem. It exists all across the country. Deck collapses are fairly common in the United States, according to officials. And here's a picture of a deck collapse on a what appears to be a condo building. And then a few little excerpts from some news articles. A balcony collapsed in Malibu, which 4 people unfortunately were transported to the hospital. 3 injured in Westbrook, Maine on a deck collapse. 11 injured after a Tennessee restaurant deck collapse during a birthday party. So this is just to give you an idea that this is not just California. Building standards across the United States are relatively similar no matter where you live. that this elevated elements is a component of many buildings across the United States. A few pictures of, again, elevated elements, exterior elevated elements, and these ones have actually experienced collapse. It's a common one. We have a little condo or a unit above a garage that has a little balcony, and it is peeled away from the wall. And unfortunately, for the life of me, I look at this picture and I've studied this picture. I can't, and John, you could chime in here if you want. I can't even tell you how this thing was attached. I don't see any bolts stemming out from that wall. I mean, I'm not really sure how this was attached originally to begin with. So this may not even have anything to do with the vapor barrier or the wood structure becoming damaged or rotted over time. This may be just a really, really poor construction mistake, unfortunately not found by the city inspector at the time. But again, it's just another picture of a circumstance or an instance where we have an exterior elevated element that has become unstable and has fallen. Go ahead, John. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I don't, from that photo, I don't see any evidence that there's any structural connection there.
I know. I don't ever think it was actually attached.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was put in there for John. I knew he was going to be here, and he'd have fun with that as an inspector himself.
Crazy.
Here's another picture of an exterior elevated element. This one is made of concrete and metal, and you can take a look at where it used to attach to the brick building. You can see the brownish red coloration. That's rust. So what happened here apparently was the rust, the rebar, moisture got into the concrete, and the rebar, the metal support, the structural support inside the concrete, started rusting away, and unfortunately eventually couldn't handle the weight. So what does this mean to you? Why am I here today? Why am I giving you this presentation as realtors in the Los Angeles area? Basically, so far I've shown you and discussed a little bit about Berkeley, the city of Berkeley in California. But we've recently adopted a new law that covers all of California, and it requires the inspection of decks and balconies for buildings with 3 or more multifamily dwelling units. So you as realtors need to know this. I'm sure your clients would be very interested to know that this law exists. I'm not going to read the whole law. I'm just going to point out this right here is just some sort of a summary of the law. The law obviously is a lot longer than this, but basically starting January 1st, 2019, the new law will require property owners of buildings containing 3 or more multifamily units to conduct an inspection of the decks, balconies, and other components more than 6 feet above ground level. The inspection must be completed by January 1st, 2025, and will require subsequent inspections by January 1st every 6 years thereafter. Okay, so that's a very important piece of information for you as realtors to share with your clients and make sure that your client knows that when you're selling and or buying, that eventually, well, first of all, they need to find out if that inspection has been done yet by the seller. If they're going to own the building during this time period, they need to know that they're going to have to do the inspection at some point. We'll get into that a little bit more later. So the purpose of this inspection obviously is to determine whether the decks and balconies and exterior elevated elements are safe to use, and checking into their associated waterproofing elements and making sure that they're not breached and they're not allowing moisture to enter into that structure and causing hazardous conditions that could cause failure. And of course, moisture with wood can cause fungus, mold, dry rot, so forth and so on. The inspection report must be in writing and provided to the owner within a specified time frame. We'll go over that a little bit later. And there's a few things that the report must assess: the current condition of the decks, balconies, exterior elevated elements, the expectation of future performance and projected service life. So that's something that you won't find typically in even a real estate home inspection. A general physical inspector is really not there or unable to oftentimes offer that information of how long they expect that element to last. They can take guesses and so forth and so on, and we try to offer as much information as possible, but that's not really inside our scope or our standards of practice. In this inspection, it will be. And then, of course, any recommendations for further inspections and or repairs that may be necessary. And then also, if that deck or elevated element will constitute any sort of threat to the life and health and safety of occupants. Assessment of the load-bearing components and associated waterproofing elements. And the report has to include photographs, test results, a narrative, so forth and so on. So it's a very, very inclusive report, and it's a very informative report. And then obviously, if the deck or balcony is found by the inspector to be in need of repair, those must be corrected by the owner of the building. The repairs cannot be performed by the licensed contractor who served as the inspector. So again, this is verbiage taken from the law. You guys can look up the law if you want and, just dig into it and get all of the verbiage. So obviously this law was passed in the response to the balcony collapse that occurred in an apartment building in Berkeley. And I have a highlighted area. While the inspection and any repairs are not a point of sale requirement, I think that's important for you guys to understand as realtors. Copies of all inspection reports must be maintained in the building owner's records for not less than 2 inspection cycles and must be disclosed and delivered to a buyer at the time of any subsequent sale. That's very, very important. And then number 5 is highlighted in red, and this says this law does not apply to a common interest development as defined in section 4100 of the Civil Code. Common interest development, condominium, basically. Now, why does that law not apply? What does now? It didn't apply when that original law was written. Governor Gavin Newsom signed into law on August 30th of 2019, the basically Senate Bill 326, which was dubbed the Condominium Balcony Bill. And essentially it goes on to say that the inspection of condominiums or the homeowners associations shall also do this inspection on those buildings. And they're looking for the same thing. They call it the same thing, the exterior elevated elements. And the timeline, though, is a little bit different. This is supposed to be done no later than January 1st, 2025, just like the other one, but every 9 years after that. The other one is every 6 years. So this one has a window of up to 9 years. You could do it less, but up to 9 years. So basically, right now, everything is encompassed in the exterior elevated element inspection. So how do you know? How do you know if your building requires this elevated element inspection? Very simply put, to find out if you are compliant to the California's new balcony inspection laws, SB 721 and SB 326. So let's say your building here on the left, you ask yourself, does your building have 3 or more units? If it's no, then no inspection is required. If it's yes, you have to ask yourself, does your building have wood-framed exterior elevated elements? If it's no, no inspection is required. If it's yes, you have to ask yourself, is your building classified as a common interest development? If it's no, your inspection is required under SB 721. If it's yes, your inspection is required under SB 326. So previously to SB 326 being passed, your inspection was only required under SB 721. Condominiums were not required, but that has recently changed. So why do we need to do inspections on exterior elevated elements? Anytime an inspection is being done, or even a code is being made, codes are made so that a building or a component can conform and meet a minimum safety standard or a minimum safety requirement. So obviously the answer comes down to improving safety. It improves safety, period. If that deck or balcony or those decks or balconies that we've seen through this presentation were inspected prior to their failure, lives would have been saved. It's quite possible that that inspection would have revealed conditions that they would have recommended immediate repair, not to use the balcony or the deck. So it's quite likely that lives would have been saved. And that's why we're improving safety. There are parts of the building that regularly continue to have documented failures that cause injury to occupants. Balconies, decks, porches, and stairs. According to the statistics compiled by Consumer Product Safety Commission, structures such as balconies and decks failures have caused thousands of injuries per year. So again, this is why we want to do this inspection. In California, the event that made this a recurring issue too big to ignore was the Berkeley event. So it had happened before. It had happened before. But eventually, it's just like it's like an automobile recall. I believe it was, well, I won't name the manufacturer, but one of them many years ago were having a lot of problems with cars catching on fire after an accident. And it took the lawsuits basically becoming more expensive than retooling the line to redesign the car. for them to actually redesign the car. So it does come down, to, unfortunately, oftentimes to money. But obviously, Berkeley was sort of the last straw, if you will, and then we started adopting these laws. SB 721 and SB 326 is the resulting legislation to require those inspections in order to prevent future collapses occurring on existing buildings. So which of buildings are affected by SB 721? We sort of went over that already in the previous slide. Basically, the law states that all buildings in California that have 3 or more multifamily dwelling units are required to have their exterior elevated elements inspected. This means any triplex.
Chris,
Yes.
last question. When you own a condominium, is the condo, the balcony, is it also need to be done? Or this is by the association?
The condo, the balcony is the exterior elevated element. If that, you may have in a condominium, you have maybe exterior attached stairs or the balconies attached to the outside building. That is what needs to be inspected if they meet those criteria. Remember, the condo would have to be made of wood or the attachments made of wood for this law to apply. So you would have to discuss that with your HOA, because obviously the HOA would be in charge of getting that inspection done, and possibly have the building engineers or have a engineer or architect come in and determine what type of building it is, what type of components were used in that building to determine if it actually needed the inspection. Did that help to answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So buildings and complexes that are classified as common interest developments, such as we were just talking, they're excluded from SB 721, but they're included in SB 326, as we read down at the lower end of the page. The only time when condos are subjected to SB 721 is when an apartment building is going condo conversion. So you have an apartment building that now those units are being converted to condos. They would require under SB 721 that the apartment building be inspected for these triple E's prior to the building being converted to condo and closing of escrows on the condos. California Association of Realtors, your car, we all familiar with? This is your RIPA. This is your Residential Income Property Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instructions, essentially your contract for your clients when purchasing income properties. Section H of that document, elevated elements, it does discuss what needs to be done on your end as a realtor to protect yourself and your clients and your brokers, your offices and things like that. So if the property is part of a building with 3 or more dwelling units, the Health and Safety Code, section 17973, blah, 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 requires that an inspection of any exterior elevated elements be completed by January 1st, 2025, and every 6 years thereafter. And then seller shall, within the time specified in paragraph 19, provide to buyer a copy of the inspection and accompanying report. And if any corrective work is required, proof that corrective work had been completed in accordance with code and permit requirements, or a statement that no such inspection has been made, and if made, that no corrective work had been completed in accordance with the Health and Safety Code. So you see, during your transaction, really you're the conduit of information, as in all things, but this is an important thing to inform your client of and to make sure that you obtain any disclosure regarding either an inspection that was done or not done, or an inspection that was done and recommended repairs were made, and then the disclosure of what those repairs were, all the documentation that goes along with them. So that's important to know. So the inspection basically consists of, there's 3 types of inspections or ways to go about the inspection, the options for inspecting. These are not necessarily laid out in their order. I just laid them out this way because it would be, if I were to perform this inspection, this is the way I would go about it, gradiently, if you will. Because we wouldn't want to just go in and start ripping apart, plaster and the stucco of the building or the brick or anything like that. We would want to start gradiently. So one option for inspecting is the survey of the visible components. If the under deck area has ventilation grates, we can remove those. We can get in with a flashlight and visually see maybe whatever components that we can see to determine if there's any breach in that vapor barrier and any damage to those components. If that's not available to us and we can't really determine any real information that could be helpful, then we may want to try boroscoping. Boroscope basically is just a very, very small camera that you can like drill a small hole in the component, whether it be wood or stucco, and you can slide the camera in and have a look around. Boroscoping is a great tool because it basically creates minimal damage and offers oftentimes a lot of information. And then of course, destructive testing, destructive inspecting, and that would be removing the underside of the deck to view framing members. I have a picture of that a little bit coming up here in a second. So those are the three sort of options for inspecting. And again, I would always start with the survey of visible components rather than going in and bringing your demolition tools. I just don't think that's necessary. Now, who can do the inspection? The inspection shall be performed by a licensed architect, licensed civil or structural engineer, a building contractor holding any or all of the A, B, or C5 licenses. And then they would also have to have a minimum of 5 years experience of building those type of structures. They also could be a building inspector or building official, a certified inspector with a certification. So a CREA inspector could actually perform this inspection. This is a high risk inspection. It carries a lot of liability with it, obviously, as you can see. So getting the insurance to perform this inspection is going to be difficult for many inspectors that would want to do this as a service for their client. Maybe they're adding it to an existing inspection system or something like that. Just, really look into it if you're going to be doing that. They also cannot be employed by the local jurisdiction while performing these inspections. So you couldn't have a contractor employed with the city of Los Angeles or wherever they're doing the inspection, or a city of Los Angeles building inspector. They can't do this inspection. And we've talked about it already a couple times, but the purpose of the inspection is to determine, the condition and the safety of the exterior elevated elements. That's in summary. So the inspector's report, in keeping with what the report is, the inspector's report is required to be presented to the owner within 45 days of the completion of the inspection. And this is a picture showing you what that destructive testing would look like. And then also these over here on the right-hand side, you can see these sort of what look like black rectangles. Those are ventilation screens. So it's quite possible that one was popped. They looked inside and went, okay, yeah, we see enough here where we should probably open that up and get a better view and a better understanding of what may be occurring. And this is an example of likely they started with that first inspection, that sort of lower tier, less obtrusive, less destructive inspection by just looking in those vent holes. And then they decided that, yes, we think opening it would be better. Second criteria of the inspection is the current condition of the exterior elevated elements is what we are looking to find out. An inspection that basically gave you no information is not an inspection. An inspection that would just to come in. Oftentimes, that home inspectors, we come in and say something is serviceable. We say that the faucet was tested and it appeared to operate normally. This inspection, even in its serviceable state, requires a little bit more information, a little bit more doing on the inspector's part, a little bit more investigation on the inspector's part. They really have to let you know that they looked into the visible areas and they checked the moisture barriers and any areas that were caulked, or the door thresholds, were they loose, or did it appear that there was moisture entering? The inspection is very important, as I've said numerous times, and it needs to come with that information. Then because of that, the inspector really needs to be thorough, because they are, in part of the report, they are to give the client, the owner or the future owner, the expectations of the future performance of this exterior elevated elements, projected service life, recommendations of any further inspections or repairs, so forth and so on. All the reports shall contain photographs. Home inspection reports still are not required by any law to contain photographs. We as inspectors think they're great, and I believe you as clients and agents think they're great, but these inspections reports are required to have photographs. So what did we learn today? Anything? Oh, I hope we did. Exterior elevated element is a structural element of a building, including supports, associated waterproofing systems and railings that has the following properties. It extends beyond a building's exterior walls. It is designed for human use. It has a walking surface more than 6 feet above ground level. It has a load-bearing components made with wood or wood-based products. They include balconies, decks, porches, stairways, walkways, and entry structures. Triple E's must be inspected by the appropriate professional by January 1st, 2025, and every 6 years, 9 for CIDs, common interest developments, after the initial inspection. So basically, that's in summary what we've learned today. And I guess maybe I should have just started with, or could have presented that slide, but I really think, again, out of respect and out of the importance of this inspection, I think that it was very important to share with you all of the information. So I want to thank you very much for joining us here today. It is always my great pleasure to be part of the Women's Council and to have the honor of sharing information with you. Thank you so much. I believe we're going to go into a Q&A period. I'm going to stop sharing here. And
I just have one question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Jake. So I will ask our membership chair, Marissa, to help us moderate. And I see already that Jacob has a question. So we will have Marissa moderate with Jacob. And for anybody else, if you have any questions, please do put in the chat or raise your virtual hand. Or if you're joining us on Facebook Live, please put in the Facebook messages and we will have somebody take a look at it. Thank you.
Okay, so if anyone has questions, please go ahead and unmute and ask your question to Chris.
Okay. The question is there a, excuse me, is there a, for the building, what year it's built until what year, you know, is there a limit of, or is for any year that building is built, was it built in 1920 or built in 1980 in order to do the inspection? That's the first question. The second question, is there any width as far as the balcony goes that it does not need any inspection?
Let me answer your first question, your first part of your question first. There is provisions in the law, and as I sit here today, I don't remember exactly what they are. You can look up that Senate bill, relatively easy. As I said in my presentation, that this is a very condensed version of the entire law. It's very, you know, a law can be very, you know, in depth. But thank you actually for asking that question, because I will put that into this presentation so that in the future, that's important information, I think, for many people to have. So unfortunately, and I apologize, I can't answer that question right now, but I do know the law does answer that question. And what was your second part of your question? I didn't understand what you were saying. I'm sorry.
The width, is there any width involved in order to do the inspection on that at all?
Any risk involved?
Width of the balcony. Is there
Risk
like,
of I see what you're saying. Sure. Well, the only way I could answer that is that if we're doing destructive testing, the risk is that the stucco is going to be damaged and it needs to be repaired and patched. There have been inspections done where we've done like load bearing tests on the inspection and with sandbags, and have condemned the balcony because we can see the balcony under load starting to sag. So that has been, you know, the sandbags have been removed and said, okay, the balcony is now, you know, not usable. So the risk, yes, there is definitely risk. There could be risk of damaging the balcony during the inspection process, depending on what type of inspection you're doing, or what level, I should say, of inspection. And of course, finding a damaged balcony means that the balcony needs to be replaced or repaired. So there is some risk, yes. Thank you, Jacob. I appreciate those questions.
thank you.
I have just real quickly, Sherry Young, it's always the vapor barrier. Yes, it's true. It's always the vapor barrier. This is so true. You know, we designed houses to keep out moisture so that they remain houses and buildings and structures for a very, very long time. So the vapor barrier becoming compromised is a very common problem.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Chris? You can just go on and jump off unmute and give us your question.
May I ask a question?
Of
Yes,
course,
please.
Hiroko.
The requirement for the inspection will start from 2025, January 1st, you mentioned. Then this is for all those affected building, like I didn't remember the flow chart flow, but I understand. But for maybe real estate transaction, usually we have a home inspector, general home inspection, and then if we think about that building will be affected for this requirement, do you think you recommend or we have to have somebody to get the inspection for this structure inspection during the transaction? I'm not sure, it's a couple of years ahead, but if you have some insight, I will appreciate you let me know.
Great question, Hiroko. Thank you so much for that. Actually, Hiroko, the inspection is already required. It started to be required in 2019, and they must be completed by January 1st, 2025. So we're already inside the window of requirement. The law states that the owner of the building shall have the inspection performed, the owner. So you as a realtor buying or selling a building, you're not required to have your client have that inspection. As I said, your RIPA, your residential income purchase agreement, basically states in the section of elevated elements, it states that disclosures need to be gotten from the seller if there was an inspection done or if there was no inspection done. If there was an inspection done that required repairs, what repairs were made, and the documentation of those repairs. So you as a realtor, that's where your responsibility, according to the laws and according to your contract, and I'm not a lawyer, but how I read it, that's kind of where your responsibility ends. It's kind of a disclosure. You tell your client. And then if your client says, okay, fine, I'm going to own the building, then they would have to have that inspection done prior to January 1st, 2025. Now, going to your other part of your question, as far as your home inspector, I will tell you this, and John, you're welcome to chime in if you wish, but I will tell you this. There's not a home inspector on the planet that is going to touch this. It is a high liability inspection, highly liability inspection. I would not want a home inspector. Did I say homeowner or home inspector that wouldn't touch this?
Home inspector.
Okay, good. There's not a home inspector on the planet that would touch this unless they were operating specifically in that inspection arena, providing that specific inspection. But I really don't believe you're going to find an inspector who's going to incorporate that into their general physical inspection while they're out there performing a CREA standard or any other accredited agency standard of practice type of inspection. With this inspection is very high risk, and in order for that inspector to be covered with insurances, they would have to be carrying a different insurance than their regular errors and omissions insurance.
Sounds about right to me.
Yeah. This is beyond, Hiroko, a general physical visual inspection. This is really a more in-depth, and it has to be separate. It can't get lost inside another report, realistically. So that's my take on it. You're welcome to ask, because a regular physical general inspector, they're going to look at door thresholds anyway. But I wouldn't want a physical inspector I wouldn't want you to assume that they're the ones that are going to be performing the inspection, because they won't.
I see. Thank you. So as a real estate agent, what we can do is we need to investigate, help to investigate this building is required for this, and then if it is done or not, then that is what we can do, right? To get disclosure and the condition as much as possible.
Absolutely. Let's say you were buying an apartment building that was built in 1955. You're going to get disclosure from the seller. Has the inspection been done? Has it not been done? Both of that, according to your contract, your RIPA, either one of those needs to be disclosed. No, I have not performed that inspection. Yes, I have performed that inspection. Yes, I have performed that inspection, and this was what was found. And here are the receipts and the documentation and the contracts and the work orders that show you what was done about that. And that was done at this time, 2 years ago or whatever. So that would be disclosure that they would be required to give you, that per your contract, you should definitely be asking. If it's a condominium, I would definitely check with the HOA, check with the building engineers. The building engineers of the HOA are most certainly going to know if that inspection had been done, or if it was required, or when and where, so forth and so on. So yeah, you as the real estate agent, as I said in my presentation, you are the conduit of that information and of that sort of transaction occurring. You've got to make sure that those questions do get answered. Very important for you as a real estate agent. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I have been involved in legal situations pertaining to the inspection process, and disclosure. And it's very, very important that you protect yourself and your client, and offer that as part of your fiduciary duty.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Great question, by the way, Hiroko. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And now from the members in our audience, are there any other questions or comments, maybe from another home inspector, or questions or comments? You want to unmute, jump off on mute, or throw it in the chat? Okay. Hearing no more. Go ahead, Chris.
Sherry Young shared something here that I think is important. Thank you, Sherry, for sharing this in the chat. She says that she lived in a condo where the second floor balconies were rotting because the barrier was compromised during installation. That's a common problem. They put a vapor barrier up there, and then they accidentally put nails through it, or they put nails through it on purpose. So it can get compromised, or it accidentally gets ripped by some other contractor or something. And they got the builder to fix them because it was in the first 3 years of the building. So obviously, your builder does have a warranty period, and they're typically in California, your builder is responsible for that construction for the first 10 years. So anyway, apparently they're failing again. So that's a fairly short time frame to discover that they were failing, or there was a component that was failing upon building it, then to be repaired, and then now 3 years later, they could possibly be failing again. So thank you for sharing that, Sherry. That's good.
Thank you, Ms. Sherry. And I think we have another comment in the chat. As a home inspector, I approve this message. So your message was approved, Chris.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm here, Corey Rivers from Pillar to Post, also with John.
Oh, terrific, Corey. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you guys coming in. I think this is, as home inspectors or inspectors in general, I think it's important we all, share that information, and, we're there to keep people safe, and that's really what we do. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, at this time, hearing no other questions or comments. I'm sorry, who did I hear?
It's Cindy. I do
Oh,
have
okay.
a quick comment. I just want to say that, I'm really glad that we're having this conversation in regards to exterior element, because I personally was in the middle of escrow with a condo. And like you mentioned, the balcony, I think there was rotten wood in the balcony. So after a rain, the whole balcony collapsed into the garage, where in the middle of escrow, there's a big gigantic hole in the garage because all the water from the balcony kind of seeped down. So I'm just really appreciative that we're having this conversation. I think balcony is definitely a topic that's not being discussed as often as it could be, and as we should, because almost a lot of homes now all have a balcony. And I think that's definitely an area that, whether they're leveled, whether there is a water drainage, it's all the issue that I think it's extremely important when it comes to home inspection. Sometimes that gets overlooked. So I just know I had a couple of situations. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate that. I agree with you. I think it's very important that we're having this discussion. It was funny that we seem to have a smaller turnout on this topic than we did on my previous topic. I think next time we talk about this, we'll probably have a large turnout. I think that by spreading the word and getting the idea out there of how important this information is to know about, especially as realtors, because this is one of those pieces of information that can be a gotcha, gotcha 10 years after you sold or bought that building, and then they find out something happened here. You want to avoid that lawsuit, and again, that's so important to make sure your clients are aware of this. So thank you, Cindy, for those comments. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, in my situation, the buyer was a realtor, so it kind of made it a little easier. They're willing to take on the risk, and so that transaction did close. I just want to mention.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, I think most inspections, you can still close transactions. There's solutions for everything. I have a mold inspection company. We find problems, significant issues. And we also make sure that our clients understand that, something can be done about it, that there's resolutions, there's fixes for everything. And we don't have to run down the street, pulling our hair out of our head.
One more comment I want to ask.
Yeah.
So for you as a general inspector, will you check the balcony condition and also including the foundation or whatever? I think usually then will you be able to suggest this might have a risk or this might be affect something like that for the structure when you do the general inspection usually?
Absolutely. The only time that we're not going to really inspect exteriors, foundations, grounds, things like that, is when we're doing a common interest development, like a condo. Basically, our mutual client is buying those 4 square walls. They're buying 1 unit. So we're not really inspecting the roof or things like that. We may offer information about things that we see while we're out on the roof looking at the air conditioner or something like that. But normally, a inspection of a condo or a home or basically a 4-plex or a 3-plex or above apartment building, so forth and so on, would include a visual inspection of the components of some exterior elevated elements. It doesn't, as I was alluding to before, it doesn't include the inspection as an exterior elevated element inspection, but we most certainly are looking out for those things as we're walking underneath the balcony. If we see damaged wood or dry rot, we're going to be referring to the pest control operator or referring to a contractor. So yeah, our first job as inspectors is to observe and report. That's our first job. We oftentimes go outside our scope just so that we can make sure that you and our client is aware of a situation that would require further evaluation by that appropriate expert. We may not be the one that's there to inspect that component or that item, but we most certainly have, if we saw it, we kind of have to report on it. So again, I wouldn't expect a thorough investigation or inspection of the component, but I would expect a home inspector in a regular inspection is going to give you information about the condition, the condition of the element, and then recommend probably further evaluation by having that EEE inspection done. Boy, that was really long-winded to get there. Thank you, Hiroko. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And with that, Marissa, we don't have any more questions or comments, right? No.
I don't see any. I'm giving people another opportunity, going once, going twice, hearing nothing. Back to you, Miss Cindy.
Thank you so much.